So we started out with this kind of weird rite, R-I-T-E, this Abrahamic covenant that God made with Abraham. And as I told you, the ancient Eastern people would have understood this covenant. But generally what happened, there were a number of animals. They were cut in half lengthwise. They were put against one either side, and the blood would flow down, and the person pledging something would go walk through, and the person receiving that pledge would walk through. And basically what it meant was, let this happen to me if I don't keep my end of the bargain. So may I be flailed or something like that if I don't keep my end of the bargain. But in the instance of Abraham, he didn't walk through at all. Only God did in the place in the form of a flaming pot going through, and he made the covenant, and he made sure that the covenant would stay. So he made sure that it would be completed. Not Abraham, God did. And this is a foreshadowing of what Christ has done for us. And so we're going to talk about then his death and his resurrection through this. So the anchor of the week is Jesus died and rose again, and we read this passage from 1 Corinthians that talks all about the resurrection. And then we see through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we see Christ's love, we see his deity, we see Christ's desire to have relationship with us. And my prayer is that especially today, that you would be convinced of God's love for you, Christ's love for you. And so Christ conquering death, which gives those who believe hope of eternal life. So Jesus foretold that he would die. We talked about that. He told his disciples, they didn't really understand. Jesus said that he was God, and the Jews wanted to kill him for that. And then he prays in the garden. We watched that. We didn't watch that. And then he is arrested, and we watched that video. And so now we're going to talk about the accusations against Jesus. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. But after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him." So Pilate is proclaiming that Jesus is innocent of all of it, everything, that every one of the charges against him are false. So neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. So neither the Roman procurator nor the ostensibly Jewish leader Herod find any guilt in him. So how then, therefore, was he killed? And it was completely unnecessary on one hand, and completely necessary on the other. So, look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. Now, even that doesn't make sense. He is completely innocent, so I'm going to rip his back to shreds. I'm gonna flog him and release him. Now, not only is that unfair for him to be flogged when he's an innocent man, he also doesn't keep his word, right? And releasing Jesus. But one thing is for sure: Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. So I'm going to play this. I'm going to have to stop that because it won't get on YouTube if I videos on YouTube. But this is the one I was mentioning yesterday. This is really, really hard to watch. I can watch parts of it, but I can't watch it. And this was actually the moment at which I was sobbing into Josh's shoulder. So I will understand if you need to close your eyes. That's fine. But as you watch, I want you to understand two things. One is that Jesus went through this for you and for me. And the second is this. Don't ever doubt God's love for you. Don't ever doubt Jesus' love. And it said to you, I just read to you that the person was flogged until they were near death. So Jesus was very near death before he even got to the cross. And so we're gonna talk about that a little bit, and we're gonna watch another video, and then we'll be done for today. So the prisoner was forced to carry the horizontal part of the cross. Patibulum is what that was called. The stipes was the part that went up and down. It was vertical, and it was permanently fixed in the ground at the site. So all of those drawings and paintings you see of him carrying a full cross, that was not what he would have been carrying. He would have been carrying the patibulum on his back. But even that was too much, and as you know, he stumbled and fell and couldn't get up, and so Joseph of Arimathea carried that part of the cross. And so I'm gonna talk about this after the clip about what happens to a crucifixion victim, and then we'll we probably won't even get to the burial. That's probably about all of it. The word excruciating comes from crucifixion. It literally means out of the cross. I mean, as I mentioned, crucifixion is the most excruciating way to die. And so what happens on a cross is that the victim does not die of the crucifixion, they die of asphyxiation. Dr. Davis also describes what happens here, that after a short time of exposure on the cross, as the arms fatigue, great waves of cramps sweep over the muscles, knotting them in deep, relentless, throbbing pain. With these cramps comes the inability to push himself upward. Hanging by his arms, the pectoral muscles are paralyzed, and the intercostal muscles are unable to act. Air can be drawn into the lungs, but cannot be exhaled. Jesus fights to raise himself in order to get even one short breath. And those are probably the times that he said those short sentences from the cross. Finally, carbon dioxide builds up in the lungs and in the bloodstream, and the cramps partially subside. Spasmodically, he is able to push himself upward to exhale and to bring in the life-giving oxygen. And so you have this blood now that is sluggish, that is thick, and with the inability to push up after. That's why they broke their legs, so that they could no longer push up on the nails. And of course, when they got to Jesus, he was already already dead. So they didn't need to do that. And so I'm going to read this one last verse, and I don't have that up there, so I'm sure it's on there. I'll just read it to you. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. So what that means is the day of preparation means the day before the Sabbath, right? This is a Friday, and Sabbath begins at sunset on Friday. And that's why they had to get the bodies off. They were all Jewish men, right? And so they needed to be buried before sunset. And so and then it was a special Sabbath because it was the Sabbath associated with the Passover. So it was an even more important Sabbath. So the soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and those of the other. And when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with the spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. Now, John could not have understood what was happening medically there, but what was happening is that very close to death, your blood cells begin to divide into white blood cells and red blood cells. And with each of my parents, what we were told, because we knew they were dying, was to look for round red circles around their knees, on or near their knees. And when you see that, then you know that death is imminent. And in both cases, that is exactly what we saw. And in both cases, they died very quickly after that. That's what the blood and water is. And for millennia, people are like, well, that can't happen. Blood and water can't. Well, it wasn't actually water. It looked like water. And that's how John described it. But it was the separation of the blood cells. So I know this is hard. It doesn't mean that's a bad thing. It's important for us to know Christ suffered for us out of love for us, and to be grateful that he was willing to do that for you. So we will continue on Monday with more of this, his burial and his resurrection, and that's the happy times. It has a good ending. Happy ending.